quick recap is just that what I was introducing was that gamification, the main concept about gamification is trying to apply gaming mechanics to any kind of other practice. In our case, in our field, software engineering and software testing, to try to engage better the people who is doing the task, and by means of that, ensure better performance. In our specific field, the main reason why we want to try to make people more engaged in what they are doing is the main fact that writing down software tests is not typically seen as a fun activity, as something that people is willing to do, with the result that most times GUI software testing is overlooked in real projects and in the industry. Another downside, another specific downside of GUI testing is the fact that even though there are a lot of different automated software test generation tools, they cannot, in most cases, serve the purpose for GUI testing, because the definition of test cases must most of the times be made in any case by human actors, by human testers, because the automatically generated test cases typically are not realistic use cases of the applications. So what we conceptualize is the application of a popular framework, which is available in the literature from the psychology side of the science, which it is actually, as I said in the very beginning, a general framework which can be applied, and it is applied to many different tasks, which are not necessarily software related. This framework is called the Catalysis Framework, and it defines 8 so-called core drivers of gamification. There are a lot of different elements that can be applied to each of the core drivers. What I will do right now is defining the drivers and translating them to what can be useful to software testing and what we actually developed and applied. So one of the core driver, one of the most important one, is that you have to give a meaning to someone who's doing some task. So actually, it is something that translates to provide one final objective to what you're doing. You are not doing test cases just for because it is just one metric that you have to perform at the end of the day, but it is necessary to encourage the player to do something that goes outside the specific act of test. And actually, in terms of gamification, typically it is translated in providing a narrative or a backstory to the activity that the person is doing. Another important element is the concept of accomplishment. The accomplishment factor is related to the concept of making progresses and performing things that solve problems, that solve challenges. So one of the main way to do this is translate the activities, translate the performance that is being carried out to some scoring mechanism, to some points, to some kind of mean of giving an accomplishment to the tester, to the person who's doing the task. Actually, you get points, you get some kind of evaluation after each activity you perform, so that it doesn't just goes into oblivion. Third point, empowerment. Every time you perform some kind of activity, you have to receive feedback. What typically happens when people is developing test cases is that they are kind of, test case machines who just develop test cases, maybe for regression purposes, which most of the times are developed on working applications. So they don't see actually what is the final purpose of the test cases. They just develop them, they just create assertions without seeing any kind of result of the activities. In the context of a gamified approach, one solution can be showing live feedback and showing possibly achievements to the tester. So incentivize the tester by showing some achievement for what they're doing. Like you've reached a certain amount of coverage of the application. You've reached a certain amount of use cases covered of the application. So showing the progress to the tester, which is just not the number of test cases, but some kind of metric that can engage the creation of test cases. Then we can move to more game-related mechanics, which are more higher level than just points and whatever. Other concepts that are used are the concept of ownership, which is something that is very common in software environments and in software communities, like the accumulation inside profiles of some virtual groups of currencies, like possibility of buying some enhancements of the platform that you're using by virtual goods, points, and levels. Going deep down in the Catalysis framework, another dimension is the concept of social influence. So giving the possibility of the people to be not lone wolves, but being a kind of community and sharing the results. So possibly with social or team connections. Then another concept of the Catalysis framework is to make the task look cool by making it seem something kind of elitist, something that you alone are doing. And one of the possibility of translating it into practice is to create challenges, timed challenges, or for instance, daily challenges like you have in mostly games. And last one is the concept of unpredictability. So the player has to take the drive to see, to have curiosity in what happens next. And this is done by like random rewards or Easter eggs or some special locations that happen during the execution of the application, instead of having, as I said before, just the functioning, working application where nothing happens. Last one, which is the worst one, and actually it is not so nice to apply, is the concept of avoidance, which consists in applying malices if something is not done in the right way. Anyway, this is the core concept. As I said before, it is related to psychological aspect. There is a lot of background to this stuff. Everything is motivated by psychological drivers and sociological drivers. So actually, this has a very important foundation and can be applied to any kind of task, not only to something software engineering related. What we did was trying to apply some of this concept to the concept of GUI testing practically. To do so, we defined a set of metrics that can be applied to evaluate the performance of testing, so that we could give a score based on these metrics. And we created and applied gamification features based on these metrics. We defined a scoring mechanism, which is made by two components. I won't go into the details, but actually we have two types of scoring given to the users. One is a so-called base score, which is based on the exploration of the application under test. The exploration means a concept of coverage of the application, and also a concept of discovering new pages or widgets of the application which are have never been tested by other users. So the user is encouraged to find new branches in the test cases and new pages of the application that were not tested by other people. And then we have a kind of bonus score, which is based on so-called events during test execution, which mainly are bug finding or finding injected mutants or whatever, so that we can measure the amount of attention that the tester has during the execution. We made a proof of concept of everything based on a tool that you should know well, which is developed by these people. And we implemented everything as a leaderboard mechanism, which provided all the scores and all the composition of the score, where you can see highlighted widgets, coverage, and whatever, all the components of the score, which is shown in form of a leaderboard at the end of the testing session. We have implemented some kind of live feedback in the form of a progress bar, which constantly shows the coverage to the tester and the amount of widgets and pages covered, which is this one in the highest part. And in the progress bar, we show the amount of covered portion of each single page, the still uncovered part, so that the tester can see how much is missing from the page, and also the high score for that page, so that the tester is motivated to do more on the page and to explore more the page, instead of just saying, okay, I do a couple of clicks and I am done. We have added a new visual element, which is the not so much seeable yellow star in the upper left corner, which immediately shows kind of badge when you find a new page. We added random GUI mutations. So actually, for instance, we make something disappear even in the working application randomly, so that I am not testing an application which is always the same, which is always fine, but I find something that captures my attention, and it encourages me to put assertions where I see the injected mutants. I added the things we did the experiment with the students, some very simple player profile that the students could use. At the very end, we performed a thorough empirical evaluation with that in the software engineering course that we had in the master's degree. We performed a full factorial crossover experiments where we had 136 participants, and we gave them 2 applications on which they used the tool for 1 hour. I don't remember if it was the total, but whatever, on 2 different applications. And one time they used it without gamification, and the second one with gamification, and vice versa, obviously, since it is 2 by 2 factorial. And we measured 4 different measures. First of all, the effectiveness of test cases. So if the test cases were any good in finding defects, the efficiency of test cases, so the time for creating test cases, the time ratio for each kind of operation, the quality of test cases in the sense of how much they were realistic and conforming to the real use cases of the application. And finally, which was actually the most important part, the user experience of the testers. Just to have a quick recap, what we seen was that we had a slightly better coverage, which was expected because we encouraged that by enforcing high scores and leaderboards for that. We had a comparable amount of found bugs. We had actually the precision and true positives are 2 measures of the same bug finding ability of the application, of the testing phase, which was comparable. From the point of view of efficiency, we measured a slightly less amount of bugs reported over time, even though the precision was the same. So the testers looked more focused on real bugs. And the amount of visited pages and interacted widgets was anyway comparable. Instead, we have seen that the amount of pages visited over time was slightly less for the gamified tool. So the testers had more attention on each individual page they visited, instead of just running through different pages of the application. What was important, on the other hand, to measure is that the quality or the realism of the test cases was actually, there were no significant difference between the 2 approaches, which was actually what we were seeking for, because the risk was that applying gamification should push people to do something which is not the real task they are doing for. Because maybe since I see that you give me points for higher coverage, maybe I can start clicking random stuff so that I obtain more points in my leaderboards. Actually, this didn't happen. So the test cases created with gamification were comparable to those created without, which is, in our opinion, a good result. And finally, we applied a standard TAM questionnaire where in the acronyms, you read attitude towards usage, perceived usefulness, behavioral intention to use, and perceived ease of use, which is a questionnaire to evaluate the usability and the enjoyment of the tool that they were using. And what we measured is that the user experience was fairly good. And we did another questionnaire where we compared the likability of the original tool and the new tool with gamification, and all the answers were positive. So as a final recap, our findings, albeit very preliminary, are that we can obtain more page coverage, we obtain improved user experience, and we don't have significant changes in realism and quality of test cases. So the approach is actually interesting because we can obtain similar quality with actually significantly improved coverage, but with a better experience for the testers, which was the final objective from the very beginning. As our future work, we wanted to try to make it less costly to use it in a real context. So we wanted to try to externalize and implement it as a customizable Chrome browser plugin like the Selenium IDE for capture playtesting. And finally, which is most important and most difficult, try to evaluate the applicability of the tool in a real industrial environments, because for now we have only considered students in all these voyage. That's all. So thank you for your attention. It's a real pleasure to have the occasion to share these findings with you. And if you have any question, I will at least try to answer them.